As beautiful as this object is, the original 1989 Game Boy was woefully underpowered. Stacked up next to the Sega Game Gear and Atari Lynx with their full-color backlit screens, it was barely a contender. As we know though, it became the little device that could. See, Nintendo understood that portability, battery life, and most of all, games were what mattered. Nintendo had Tetris, and then they had Pokemon, and no other handheld could ever touch them again. It wasn't until the turn of the millennium, a full 12 years on, with 2001's Game Boy Advance, that would see a truly significant upgrade. The GBA was significant in another sense too, as a transitional phase when Nintendo started to get serious about China, and China started to get serious about Nintendo. This is part of the story that needs to be told. So at Happy Gaming House today, the Game Boy Advance, China, and how Nintendo eventually prevailed in the territory. But first, hit that like button, subscribe. It's in the contract, I gotta say it, but it makes all the difference for us. So, thanks. 2001's Game Boy Advance is a 6th generation cartridge-based handheld gaming device boasting a 32-bit ARM7T DMI CPU and Sharp LR35902 8080 derived CPU running at 4.194 MHz, designed by French designer Kenwell Nicholas and his Tokyo-based design studio Curiosity. Its TFT LCD display sports a resolution of 240 by 160 pixels at a size of 40.8 by 61.2 millimeters. It is backwards compatible with the Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. 2003's Game Boy Color Advance SP GBA SP is an upgraded version. It has a front lit or backlit screen depending on the model, and a clamshell form factor that protects the screen when not in use. The console has a rechargeable battery that can last up to 10 hours of continuous play with the light on and up to 18 hours with the light off. The GBA SP is backwards compatible with the Game Boy Color games, and the Game Boy Advance games. Notable games include Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald, Fire Emblem, The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, Advance Wars, and Golden Sun. In its lifetime, the GBA series sold 81.5 million units. Why did Nintendo take so long with the GBA?
I don't know.
And then with the Snap, only 3 years later for the DS to come along. And while the GBA shone, it shone bright. Actually, it seems Nintendo were working on an ARM710 based 32-bit Game Boy successor as early as 1994, codenamed Project Atlantis according to magazines at the time. This timeline is mostly confirmed by later interviews, but apparently cost proved the limiting factor, and it was easier to iterate on the Game Boy line with the Color, Light, and the Pocket. The GBA would be released across most of the world in 2001, but not in China, at least officially until June 8th, 2004 under the name IQue Game Boy Advance. Make no mistake, this was original OEM hardware, just with a different sticker. But why so late? With the DS just around the corner, and why under the name IQue? Let's back up a little.
I'm going to tell you something that I learned when I was your age.
The first officially licensed Nintendo console in China was the original Game Boy, but not until 1994 after Nintendo inked a deal with Hong Kong toy and model distributor Mani or Wanxian to act as its agent in China, including after-sales care. In 1996, probably at great expense, Mani hired one of the 4 heavenly kings of Hong Kong pop, Aaron Kwok, to star in its Playing the World with Nintendo Game Boy campaign, one of the earliest gaming ads to air in the mainland, excluding the legendary domestic Famiclone or study machine Little Tyrant aka Xiaobaowa. For the Game Boy Color and Pocket, the rights for the mainland transfers to Elderly, while Nintendo themselves handled Hong Kong and Taiwan. Sales were low due to high cost, piracy, and competition with legally grey parallel imports that often avoided VAT tax and so were cheaper. As such, little investment was made in Hanhua or Chinese localization of games, which mainly fell to pirates or the so-called Minjian Hanhua. In fact, the flagship Pokemon series would not get a true release in China until 2016's Sun and Moon, though the series had been popular since the first generation. Checking the Game Boy database, a scant 66 games are listed as being officially distributed in China by Mani. This is where IQue and the GBA enter the equation. We have talked about the IQue before in our IQue Player episode, link above. but here's the abridged version. IQue starts with the singular and special relationship Silicon Valley entrepreneur and technologist Dr. Wei Yan managed to forge with Nintendo throughout the 90s. As the head of Silicon Graphics Inc. or SGI, he oversaw the development of Nintendo 64's graphics processor, and through a later company ArtX contributed to both the GameCube and Wii. He was involved in founding several other companies from the mid-90s to early 2000s, Navio, Route3, IQue, all with close links to Nintendo. Having forged such a close connection on many fronts within the company, Wei Yan was well poised to execute on his next project. At around the same time, in 2002, Nintendo was undergoing a changing of the guard, with Satoru Iwata elevated to company president. The moment was right. A booming Chinese middle class seemed to offer up a potentially infinite new market. And so Wei Yan convinced Nintendo to go into partnership with him, establishing IQue as a joint venture headquartered in Suzhou. It was registered with a capital of $28 million with Yan as the majority shareholder at 51%, with the remaining 49%, including patents, IP, etc., residing with Nintendo. The first fruit of this collaboration became 2003's IQue Player, a forward-thinking, digital-only console in a controller version of the N64. Again, we discussed it previously here. Though a solid piece of tech with several clever innovations, I mean, I kind of love this thing, it still had a last-gen gaming vibe. For Christ's sakes, the Nintendo 64 was already 7 years old at this point. The thinking was to keep costs down, cut off piracy at the head, and skirt 2000's Article 6, which effectively banned gaming consoles. For this reason, the GBA was positioned as a PDA. But Chinese gamers were none too happy to be taken for a ride, and several factors led to its fall. And that was to become a trend. Several games that were announced and fully localized would be cancelled before release. Remember, Nintendo was doing well in China. By some estimates, they'd sold 400,000 GBAs in 2002 through parallel imports, which is still money in Nintendo's pocket. It's the games that are at issue. Flashcard sales were rampant. Yes, piracy is cheaper, but also if people wanted to play games in their native language, what alternative was there without official localizations? For IQue, the value proposition was to offer a product at comparable price to an import, but with the added after-sales guarantees. To offer high quality and consistent localizations while combating piracy. Whether from pressure from Nintendo or strategic reasons, after the IQue Player's flop, IQue would bet again on old hardware, this time the GBA. By the time of the IQue GBA's announcement at a press conference in Chengdu in June 2004, the world was well aware the DS was coming. Nevertheless, the IQue GBA launched on June 8, 2004 in two colors, Platinum and Black, with two games, Wario Land 4 and Super Mario Advance. It reportedly took only 4 days for pirated copies of both titles to begin circulating, and no further games were released until December, by which time, only 4 months, the IQue GBA SP was already out. The cost of the base GBA ran to about 490 yuan, while the premium SP with its clamshell design, front-lit screen and rechargeable batteries coming in at 688 yuan, just 50 kwai more than the import model. Still, little attention was given to the IQue in the press or in the gaming public at the time, as the GBA was already seen as old hat, and the trickle of games did little to excite. In the end, only 8 games were released, although 20 games were fully translated with a further 10 near completion. On March 25th, 2019, many of these leaked onto the internet, though this leak didn't include the planned Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire release, which is yet to surface. The Lost Media Wiki has extensive page on IQue's many cancelled localizations across multiple platforms. Curious as still is indication that IQue sunk 4 years of development time into an NC GBA flashcard with network capabilities. The idea was ultimately scrapped for technical reasons, but one wonders what impact a digital store and legitimate flashcard option for storing multiple games would have had on piracy, and how attractive a carrot network play would have been. Online Pokemon in 2004, anyone? What the IQue did get to market in 2005 was their Play Yan or IQue MP4 cart, compatible with the DS and all GBA systems. true to its positioning in China as not strictly a gaming device, the IQue MP4 allowed for video and MP3 playback. The GBA SP era of 2006 to 2007 would be the high watermark for IQue. The revenue would increase to over 100 million with strong domestic SP sales over imports and the expanding into the Russia market. IQue would continue to market and release Nintendo consoles for the China market, including the IQue Game Boy Micro, the IQue DS, the DS Lite, DSi, and IQue 3DS XL, until the brand was retired in 2018 and Nintendo switched to partnering with Tencent. So given all this, how are we to assess the GBA and its legacy, especially in China? GBA was the first major evolution of the Game Boy. With it, Nintendo cemented its dominance in the handheld space, carried to its logical conclusion with the hybrid Switch console. Memories of GBA are memories of twisty front lights, of link cables, flash cards like GBA Link, Easy Flash, and XG Flash. Memories of converting films with Metea AVI to GBA to .GBA format to watch on a small screen for the first time before we ever had smartphones. For China, it meant Nintendo was here to stay. The IQue GBA SP especially was a hit. Culturally, it is also an important system for early fan translation groups such as Wolf Team Langzhu, possibly the first, established in 2000, and Hong Kong-based angel group Tianshi Hanhua Xiaozi. Pokemon 386 versions of Ruby and Emerald became cultural touchstones with questionable translation choices, later corrected with a perfect addition, spearheaded as a community-led effort by PMGBA, the Chinese Pocket Monsters fan group founded in 2003. What the GBA teaches us most of all here is that language has always been a point of contention in gaming in China, a fact that continues until this day. Although the situation has been improving, in many senses then the GBA did in fact advance things. This has been HDH, I'm Jesse, and until next week, game on, you pretty things.